Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on the West Coast. Of course, it is the afternoon on the East Coast, or for our European friends that may be joining us today. We are super excited for this webinar. This one has been in the making. We've planned this one out for almost a year now. We've been talking about doing a special webinar on marketing and branding, especially for attorneys. We have, of course, with us today, Jessica Gonzalez and Maytal Manzouri, two of the most sort of well-branded attorneys that I know. Both have really wonderful social media presence and have expanded their personal brands well beyond the name recognition that most of us are familiar with. And so just a really wonderful job that they've done. And we've been hoping that they would teach us the ways that they've learned through trial and error on their own. Without further ado, I want to hand it over to two wonderful individuals, part of the leadership of our wonderful INCBA Association. Maytal Manzouri is on our executive committee. She is our corporate secretary and a wonderful lawyer down in LA. Jessica Gonzalez is the co-chair of our students committee. Again, just a wonderful attorney that has an incredible wealth of experience in the cannabis industry and has joined the recently formed Ruddick Law Group in New York. And so we're super excited to hear from both of you. Both of you have personal brands that are larger than life. So please tell us how you got there and how you developed this.
Thanks, Chris, so much. I guess I can just tell a little bit about myself. Hi, I'm Maytal Manzouri. For those of you that don't know me, I see a lot of people on this participant list that I do know. Thank you for joining. I'm the managing partner for Manzouri Law. I started my own firm in 2010, been largely cannabis focused in general. Started out more on the criminal defense side, and then now currently doing a lot of regulatory and licensing and corporate and transactional work. It's an exciting industry in LA, and we love being a part of it. As far as marketing and branding goes, that's been something that, is near and dear to my heart. I love that side of it. It's just exciting to me to be able to, kind of put my personal brand out there and how that's evolved over the years. And I just remember sort of when Twitter literally first became a thing, I was like, I'm going to register the name 420 Attorneys. And I never really used it that much, but I still had the name. And then when Instagram came out, that was a platform that I really sort of connected with Instagram because it was more photo based, which I really enjoyed. I've always enjoyed photography and kind of like memes and so participating in that. And then I would say, about 10 years ago, somebody told me just start a blog, just start writing articles online, make your digital imprint. And I found that to be so satisfying in this world where you could literally just publish whatever you wanted to the public, right? There wasn't in this digital universe, you can put any article you want on the internet and people can find it and sort of hear your thoughts one-on-one. So I found that really exciting. And, I think as a lawyer, we go to law school and we're kind of stripped of all of our creativity and joy, really. So I think this has been one way that I've been able to just sort of reclaim a lot of that. And so I'm really excited to share it with you. And I'm really excited to be here with Jess, who is just a force. And, we've known each other for a long time and we share a lot of similar, pleasures in this realm. So I'll let her introduce herself.
Yeah, so thanks. So super honored to be on this marketing webinar with you, Maytal. For the folks here, I'm Jess Gonzalez. I've been an attorney now for almost 6 years, but really cool full circle moment that I really want to share is the fact that I used to see, Maytal's marketing and 420 Attorneys when I was just starting, and it really inspired me to be a different type of attorney than what we're traditionally taught in law school. And I think more so when we start working at law firms. So for part of this presentation, I'm going to take it from the perspective of the employee, somebody who is working for a law firm, while Maytal is going to give a lot of her experience owning her own law firm. So for the folks here who are either on their own, have their own ship, or folks who are still an employee at a law firm, you're going to get both of those perspectives. But I think Maytal just nailed it like right on the head, is that a lot of times as lawyers, we are stripped of a lot of our identity, of a lot of our desires, especially if you're a new attorney coming into the space. You don't necessarily get to select the areas that you want to practice in. If you did get to, you're one of the lucky ones, or else you have to fight for it, right? So I know that being a very young attorney, and I was the first one in my family, there was no sort of blueprint of what to do. So I just sort of followed what law firms used to tell me, but it always felt so uncomfortable, like an outfit that didn't quite fit so right, until I really started to understand who I am and started really placing a hard boundary of, these law firms are not going to tell me who I am, but I have to create that first. So over the past 6 years, I have branded myself sort of with very little sort of outside help. So we're going to go through a couple of sort of our tips and tricks and what we've done from the attorney perspective. And then obviously there are marketing professionals out there, you know, who do this for a living, but it's really important to also understand how to do it for yourself, so that even if you do have to hire an outside marketing firm, you have your own vision that you stick to. So,
and there's question and answer at the end. We've reserved a good amount of time for question and answer. So if you have questions, you know, jot them down or put them in the chat, and we'll definitely want to address them.
Exactly. So today, for the type A folks who like to know where we are and where we're going, here's a couple of things that we're going to talk about today. So we're going to define what a personal brand is, how to determine your personal brand, how to build your personal brand. And while all three of them sound similar, they are quite different. We're going to provide you with some tools for brand building based on our experience, and then how to promote an event that you're participating. And as Maytal said, then we're going to leave some room for Q&A.
Yep. So I guess you know, what is a personal brand and personal branding? What's the difference? So personal brand might be more just what you're sort of putting out there unintentionally, but with, you know, real dedicated personal branding, it's what you're intentionally putting out in the real world and or the digital world for folks to see you. So, you know, that's a really nice thing that you can think about as to how you want people to actually see you in various platforms and, you know, at in-person events. And it's good to be very intentional about it because it matters.
Yep, 100%. So you may be wondering, as an attorney, like, why is my personal brand important? Or for the folks who work for a law firm, like, why can't I just rely on my firm's name or the name of the school that you went to? So I'm talking to the folks who don't want to rely on their firm's name, or who also can't rely maybe a particular school name. So the reason that I say that is I didn't graduate from like a top ranking law school, so I couldn't really fall back on my school's name. And I was working for law firms that didn't particularly support me, nurture me, you know, in any sort of way. So I couldn't rely on their name either. So when I was looking at, well, what can I rely on? There was only one name that I was going to be able to rely on, and that was going to stick with me throughout my employers, because your employers will change. Your personal brand stays with you. So it's important because you are either going to tell your story or other folks are going to do it for you. And while you can control part of the narrative, you're never going to be able to control the entire narrative about you. But based on what you share, based on what you post, based on what you participate in, you are, whether you know it or not, building your personal brand. So it's important, you know, if you want to be considered an expert or a thought leader, you want people to sort of tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, like, I really need you to come and, you know, talk about this. I need you to educate these folks. I need you to take on this client. That's one aspect of it. Visibility as well. Human beings are by nature lazy. we like to take the route of least resistance. We like shortcuts. It's why we have stereotypes. It's why we have categories, all of this stuff, because our mind automatically doesn't really want to work so hard. So when it comes to visibility, think about it this way, that some of the companies that automatically come to your head when you think of like burgers or when you think of shoes may not necessarily be the best company, but they are in your mind because they have branded and marketed themselves so highly that they're so visible. So they're really fresh in your mind. So when you're thinking about it, like human beings also want to be helpful. So if you take two of these human natures, we want to be helpful, but we're a little bit lazy, and you put those two together, if you are visible on somebody's feed constantly, you are showing up at these events constantly. Well, somebody's going to say, hey, I'm looking for a cannabis attorney. You're going to be the first one that comes to mind, whether or not they know your work product or not, by the simple fact that one, you are visible. They don't have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to get to you. And two, because they want to help somebody and they want to feel helpful. So that's where we're talking about visibility. Control of your own narrative as well. You want to be able to tell your story in a very particular way, because people might assume who you are based on what school you went to, based on what law firm you went to, based on how you look like, based on your ethnicity, whatever it has you. So especially, I think for I'm an immigrant of this country. I am Latina. I am the first to graduate college, the first to go to law school. So for me, I wanted that to be part of my narrative, but a lot of people didn't know that background of my story. They thought that I was just some super privileged lawyer who just sort of came in here, decided I wanted to do this for fun. So I had to take control of that narrative as well. And I think it's even more important for people of color as well to really take that into their hands. And then, as you're going to probably hear me say a whole bunch of time, employers change, but your brand sticks with you.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, from the law firm perspective, telling your story, it makes people, align with the brand and with the law firm and why you want to choose that law firm. And, as far as Jess's comment about your employer's change, I think it's also part of your, you can create a personal brand that's going to make you attractive to another employer, right? So as a law firm, if I have a potential associate or partner, or whoever who's looking to work with us, and they have, their own marketing assets, that's going to be attractive to me because I know that they're going to get eyes on my law firm by coming with us. So that's another thing to consider. I think, it's really important because that's really what, makes a footprint or an impact, is having a brand. And and getting business is always good. People relying on their firm. Well, that's great, but you always want to try and get your own book, right? Whether you're trying to make partner at your current firm, whatever your future plans are, attracting new client, new revenue is always a bonus.
Yeah. And I'll also, tell folks that in my previous 2 jobs that I've been offered, no one's asked me to apply or to look at my resume. And I have had certain firms, especially sort of these bigger law firms who are looking, to build out their cannabis departments and do, X, Y, and Z, just offering me positions on the spot at events through LinkedIn, throwing these really large salaries at me, and understand that I'm not applying for any of these jobs. But what are they seeing? They're seeing my brand out there. They're seeing that I can take my own initiative. I don't need to be told what to do, and that I'm very much in control of it. So that's just one thing, especially for, I think, the younger attorneys as well. And I'm still very much a young attorney. It's just important to know that as this industry evolves, people are going to be looking for this type of expertise. And if you can already get started and brand yourself as such, your value just goes up, so that it's not so much them dictating the price, like potential employers, but you dictating the price. And that's really the power of your personal brand.
Yep. And yeah, just to kind of, piggyback off of that, a few things to kind of think about internally when you're thinking about, okay, what is my personal brand? Okay, I want to try and discover that. So what is it? You want to think about sort of, yes, the specific area of law is very important as well, but more so also think about other things that energize you. For me personally, what energizes me is a team. It's empowering women, empowering kind of attorneys that are not your sort of typical attorneys, because that's what my journey was about, was similar to Jess. My parents are immigrants and not a ton of opportunity knocking on my door. I had to create my own path. And that energized me and made me want to create a path for others as well. And so that is related to law, my practice of law, in the sense that the cannabis industry is a trailblazing industry, and starting my own firm and all of that. So that's very much to the core of who I am, is giving folks a voice who, especially in law, want to do something a little bit different. So what energizes you? Is it helping people? Is it, constitutional law? What is it? And then you can really focus on that, because when you're talking about personal branding, it has to be unique to you and real to you, because otherwise it's just not going to work. What 3 words would you like to be described as? This is an activity that I've been taken through many times with various marketing folks that I've worked with. And it's a really good one, because you use these words to define yourself, your mission, and it's kind of always that basis that you can use. And we're lawyers, we like words, right? So it's really important to rally around a few words that you think describe you. What audience do you want to target? Is that client facing, potential client facing, other lawyer facing, depending on what you want to do? For example, our Instagram at 420 Attorneys, I wouldn't say it's really new client facing. It's not really designed to bring in new clients. It's more designed for cultural relevancy, just sort of brand awareness, and community is kind of the way that I look at it, education. And those are not, those are more sort of vague in what they reach and what they do, but that's kind of where I would say our target is. So what is your target? A lot of people come to something like Instagram as like a advertising and commercial avenue, and it's just not designed that way. Each platform is different. And so you got to figure out what works and who you're targeting. If you're, insurance professional, LinkedIn might be more of your audience, and you might, it's really important to design who your audience is. What 3 values drive you? This is something that I have worked on over the years. And for example, for our law firm, it's integrity, it's loyalty, it's trailblazing. And then the 4th one that we don't put on the website, which we probably should, is work-life balance. That was really important to me. Flexibility, mental health, all those kinds of things. So that's what I designed my personal brand, my firm around. And I love this 5th one. What type of work doesn't feel like work? That's such a good question. And it's one that we have to ask ourselves all the time, because as lawyers, we grind, right? There can be a grind. There's chaos. There's personalities if you're dealing with clients. There's a lot that really feels like work. So you have to always have this question really relevant in your mind, no matter what others are saying, what your boss might be saying, what your coworkers, in my case, employees, what people might be saying. You really have to think, okay, this is ultimately where I dedicate probably the most time in my life, right? Not with my kids, not with my family. We've all seen those studies. It's at work. So what doesn't feel so heavy on you? That is super important.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, when you're doing this, like, think about yourself as your own client. So I know that we are always interrogating others and trying to get a lot of information as others, but I don't think that we tend to be the most introspective human beings. So what we need to really do is you need to sort of sit yourself down, but be very honest about this, because I think what these 5 questions give you is a solid blueprint of sort of where you are and where you want to be. And that space between where you are and where you want to be is really just going to come down to these 5 sort of questions, right? So if you're thinking about, the industry, like, yes, the cannabis industry may energize you, but what about it? Go a little bit more deeper into, like, you may not give a shit about employment issues, but you really love intellectual property. So you really have to think about that. And I think the what type of work doesn't feel like work is so important, because you can't brand yourself as a thought leader or an expert or an advocate in a particular industry if you don't like it. It's going to come off extremely inauthentic. It's going to come off extremely robotic. And the audience is going to feel that. And a lot of this is going to be a lot of trial and error that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But if it's not something that you really like to do, like, are you reading something that your work doesn't require you to read? Are you reading books? Are you reading blogs? Are you watching videos on something else that isn't work, but that you truly enjoy? Perhaps, there is something there. Like, for example, throughout my legal career, what I realized is I really like public speaking. I really like teaching. I like being on stages. I like being on webinars. This doesn't feel like work to me, but this type of work actually energizes me. So at the end of the day of being a lawyer, typically you're like kind of drained, but take an inventory of your day. Like, where were moments where you were like, that was so fucking cool? And then where are moments where you were like, this blows, like, I do not ever want to do this again. And I realized I liked the client interaction, but the most that I liked were the initial consultations, because that's where I actually got to teach them. I got to walk them through. So that's when I decided I have to pivot my career in terms of who I want to be as not a lawyer, but I also want to be seen as an advocate and an educator and a public speaker, somebody that somebody can trust to go and talk on a subject that I'm familiar with, and that I can do it in a way that is successful and digestible, and in a way that really drives across my message. So I didn't learn this. I didn't really seek out in the beginning of, I'm going to be, on stages and I'm going to be talking to folks and I'm going to be doing this. But my career essentially led me and showed me these other opportunities within my legal career. And that's when I decided, I was like, this is what I like, because at the end of the day, I'm not like, wow, I'm so tired. Instead, I'm like, how can I do more of this? So I think as you also go into your career, it's not like you have to find something on the side. I think it's finding what it is that you do throughout your day that actually you like. And then we come to how can I really build my personal brand? We talked about what a brand is. We talked about why it's important. We talked about how to determine what yours is, but now how do you actually build it? So we're going to talk about 3 different buckets. We're going to talk about the power of the internet. And listen, I understand that social media gets overwhelming. I'm still trying to understand TikTok and Reels, but it's a thing, it is there, and it is something, that we will need to utilize and get very familiar with, or you outsource it. But once again, it's all about understanding yourself and a lot of self-awareness. We're going to talk about networking as well, before you sort of roll your eyes and say, oh my God, everybody just keeps telling me to network. I don't want to talk about this anymore. We do need to touch upon as to why it's important. And we'll share a couple of anecdotes about how it's been successful for us. And then in the news cycle as well, how do I get myself noticed? How do I get quoted? How do I end up in Rolling Stone? How do I end up in the New York Times? How do I become that person that people can tap on for some solid information? So we're going to go in a little bit more.
Yes, thank you. So the trial and error, for sure. I'm flipping back and forth between the last slide and this slide, because I think it can be overwhelming, and how do you digest them? So for the first one, for social media, select your preferred social media channel. So I kind of talked about that. Instagram was kind of where I felt more connected because it was more photo based. Some people love Twitter. Some people love LinkedIn.
I personally am terrified of Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So really, you don't have to conquer them all at once. just start with one. Which is there one that you connect with? And I think I see a lot of people, especially in this space, connecting on LinkedIn. I think that people feel comfortable there, and that might be a great place for you to start, the best place to start. I think you can post whatever you want on there, whether you want to share an article, you want to share something that you've done lately, pose a question to the community. I think, you can pick whichever one you like, but that one seems like the easiest point of access. You don't have to have a graphic design degree to be in there. It's really more of a community. And I would also say, you have to be consistent, and you can't look at the feedback. People get discouraged and stuck in the weeds by, they put something out there, they don't get a like, they don't get a comment. It doesn't matter. You need to just put it out there and keep going, because it takes time for things to gain traction. I know when I first started using Instagram, a lot of people gave me a lot of negative feedback that it was unprofessional, that it wasn't the right avenue for a lawyer to use. Because part of my core values is empowering female attorneys. There was a lot of female faces on the feed. And I got a little bit of blowback for that. Smoking cannabis on camera sometimes, right? But I just believed in it. So I kept going with it and was persistent. And, I think most people would say that now it's kind of in a good place. But it took a long time to get there, and I wasn't discouraged. I just launched a TikTok account, which I'm terrified of. It's horrible.
Kudos, Maytal, kudos.
Yeah, I hate the videos. I feel foolish. I've gotten feedback on that, and it's just like, you just have to try them out. And you have to be willing to make mistakes, look a little bit like a fool. We had a video on TikTok that went viral. It got 1.4 million views. And it was a video of me saying that I can smoke weed and be a cannabis lawyer and be a lawyer and be a success. And there were like 300,000 likes and comments. I mean, these are people that are really engaged with that specific. And that is, empowering. The rest of the feed is just like so dumb. I don't even know what it's about. But you just have to be willing to try, and it's okay if you don't get it right the first time or the 100th time. You just have to keep going.
I think that's super true. I think it's like, sadly, like, while like we would love to have like a sort of magical formula of, how to do this. And I'm sure, other marketing firms will tell you to do this and post, this amount of times. But I will say that once you decide on who your audience is, once you decide how you want to come across, it's all really just trial and error, like figuring out, in terms of what do people respond to the most? Do they respond a lot more to your face? Do they respond more to text? Do they respond more to videos? Do they respond more to like educational slides and carousels? You really have to think about it. And one thing, that I realized, especially on my feed, I one day was like, you know what, I'm just going to try this out, and I'm going to put what I called a professional thirst trap. And I said, I'm going to put this on and, just see how it goes. And it was just a picture of me, just like a nice outfit, but telling people, where I'm going to be. I was doing like 3 webinars that day, like a crazy person in 2020. And so many people liked it. It was like one of my most viewed posts. And that's when I realized, like, maybe people want to see more of me, and maybe me on my couch. And I realized like photos of me on my couch, me on my computer, me working, really sort of gives folks a behind the scenes look of, instead of just this very, graphics of I'm speaking here or I'm in this news article, they also like to see what I'm doing behind the scenes. So I didn't even realize that they wanted to see that until I put it out there. So there may be times where it flops, and then there may be times where it explodes. You just really have to figure it out. And I think that goes into the times of, you got to also research the best times to post. And that's also going to depend on where you live and where your audience is. So what I would recommend to everybody is, one, if you're going to be on LinkedIn, which I think is such a solid platform, because it doesn't have a lot of the cannabis restrictions that other ones do. So you can actually hashtag cannabis and actually put the word cannabis and not have to do it in funny form, is make sure that your profile is on the creator profile. So LinkedIn has options of how do you want your profile to look like. If you select creator profile, you can then put like your features in there. So you can select maybe certain articles that you've been featured in or other speaking engagements. So they see it a little bit more clearly. Same thing on Instagram. You may have a personal account, but maybe you now want to switch it over to a business/creative account, because then you'll be able to get the analytics behind it as well that will show you when your audience is most engaged with you. So for example, here on the East Coast in New Jersey, I know that if I post on Instagram and LinkedIn between 11 to 12 p.m., 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., I'm getting some solid traction. If I go past that time, I don't get a lot of traction because people are scrolling on their phones before lunch and during lunch. If I catch them after lunch, I'm not going to have their attention. But then for my West Coast folks, I get a boost around their time when they're having lunch as well. And that's what I've noticed. So once again, you got to get the analytics behind it and trial and error in terms of timing. And you can Google like best times to post, and I followed it, but I sort of have found my own personal rhythm. I would suggest sort of you do the same for that.
Yeah, I think that's great. A great point. And, you know, the analytics are super helpful. And I think as lawyers, we really enjoy that side of it. I've talked to some other non-lawyers about social media who have also said, you know, you can't always pay attention to the analytics. So make sure you still are, you know, moving forward with what you're doing and use the analytics as a good tool. This is a good one here, the Understanding Social Media Cannabis Guidelines, something that number 4, something that everybody needs to consider, even lawyers. You know, we've tried to boost certain posts like on Instagram and they won't do it because it says the word cannabis in it. In TikTok, we're doing this ridiculous thing where we say the word mint instead of the word cannabis, so that it doesn't get flagged. So you got to figure out what the guidelines are and then, you know, figure out how to navigate those.
Yep. And then there's a cross-pollination as well across. So you can use, like, you don't have to post new content on Instagram versus Facebook versus LinkedIn, but you do have to understand your audience, that they may be different. Like I use a different verbiage with my Instagram folks than I do with my LinkedIn folks. You know, on Instagram, you can't really put in a link that people can go and tap. Like, let's say you're quoted in an article. You can't really put the link in the actual post in Instagram, but on LinkedIn, you can. So maybe then you have to decide, do I want to put maybe like a graphic, or do I actually want to link the website in my LinkedIn post? That can differ. On Twitter, you're limited in terms of characters. So your, you know, paragraph long caption may not be the best thing to put on Twitter because it's not going to fit. So you're going to have to find a way to make it more concise. And Facebook, for the folks that, you know, still use Facebook, that I think is also really good because that allows you to use links and you can add, you know, some pretty lengthy captions into there. But you can also share and link your social media accounts. Like, for example, on like for Instagram and Facebook, like you link them together. And so when you post once, it'll post on both of them. So you don't have to do a lot of that work as well. But cross-pollinating can save you a lot of time. And if you're the person who wants to create a lot of bulk content and you want to sort of time it, there are a lot of different website tools where you can put your content on there, and then it'll automatically schedule it for you, and then it'll just post it at the times that you tell them to do it. So one of them I know that I've used in the past is Hootsuite. I'm sure that there are other ones out there, but that can save you time if you want to make bulk content maybe on your weekend and schedule it out so you don't have to worry about it. You know, completely up to you.
Yeah, we use Share Later.
Share Later.
Just another one. And we got a question about whether we're doing this all on our own or whether we're using like an agency. And so I just wanted to address that. So from when I first started my firm, I did everything myself. I did the website myself with like a drag and drop. I did the Instagram myself together with my staff, and we did everything in-house. And then at some point it just was not sustainable, and we went with a third-party agency that we meet with consistently. We help provide some of the content, but they're responsible for the sharing and some of the organization of it and responding to DMs and all of that. They'll kind of manage the account for us.
Yeah. And in terms for me, I do my own marketing. So the only thing that I have outsourced are for certain graphics to be created. So if I need like a post and I needed to say certain things in a very specific way, or if it's going to be a feature or an award that I've won, I'll typically have somebody create a graphic for me, but I will market it myself. I will prepare the copy. I will decide when it gets posted out. So I have not used any marketing firm my entire career. I just had it for like design and graphic, because Canva, while it's phenomenal, it's still a little difficult to use for those who are not artistically inclined. Yeah. All right.
Visual brand identity is the last one on here. I think that's really important. I remember we went through a sort of phase where we were talking about like as a law firm, what are our colors? What is the image we want to portray? And we thought that we wanted to be taken seriously with like a navy color. And that's kind of ultimately what we came up with. But then we decided, well, we're all women, so we want there to be hues of pink in there. So that was kind of where we started. And then we kind of evolved from there as a law firm. And yeah, I don't know. I think Jess, you mostly focus kind of on you as a person, and that's where your strength is, I think.
Yeah. And so in terms of like visual brand identity, like I paid for a professional photo shoot. I was the one that came up with the outfits. I was the one that selected all the places. So I was my own creative director. But I did have those taken because I did want more professional photos of me, different headshots, different things, that I can use. And so it's really important, especially if you're going to have like your own firm and you're advertising your own company. That's really when I would suggest talking to a brand strategist about just strategy, not just for brand, but for your company, like as a whole. I know that it's something I'll be doing for my consulting company, as well, once that sort of, gets more up and running. But visual brand identity is really important. And even though you may not see a lot of consistency on my profile, you do see a certain way of how I position or take videos of myself or photos of myself or articles and everything. So there is something there, but it's something that I would say for folks who are definitely branding their company, you definitely want a very solid visual brand identity. And I know that somebody asked, in the Q&A, if you have your law firm respond to comments for you. I remember I went to a law firm and it was like my second job, and I was like in my first year, and they were like, give us your LinkedIn password and we will go on and we will market for you and we will respond to everything. And it was the absolute worst mistake in the world. Like, I would not suggest this to any single employee of a law firm, to allow them to have that sort of control and insight into your LinkedIn profile. So in terms of like comments or that, it's all on my own. I'm the one that prepares the copy. I'm the one that engages with the audience, which takes quite some time because you need to up that engagement. But I have never let a law firm enter that conversation with my viewers ever, because then I can't control my response. I can't control my verbiage. I say things in a certain way that they may not. And I just really, truthfully, didn't want them anywhere near my own personal branding. But that may be.
Jess, I misunderstood that question. I typed in an answer. I thought they were asking if you were working with a marketing firm.
That was one of them. Yep. And I think there was another question also.
Oh, okay. Well, gotcha.
Yeah. All right. So I think we've gone on that. So yeah. So here, this is Maytal's.
Oh, this was just I wanted to show you guys an image, an example. So this was our top 9 posts for last year. And I think it helps to just show the impact of, when you get good engagement, how beneficial that is. And so we were advised by our social media firm to start doing more what they call reels, which are like these videos, but they could be videos of pictures But they tend to get much more engagement. And so we kind of tried them out this year, and we did a lot of stuff in Reels, and these were our top performing for the year. And these top 3 are, so the first one, it was a video of me and Tammy, who is an influencer on Instagram, the Cannabis Cutie. She's a good friend of mine. And we do like sort of like a little podcast together. We're doing another one on Friday. It's just a great place for us to get together and talk about kind of like some stuff that's happening in the industry or legal tips. So this was, the top one was planes, trains, and automobiles. We're talking about traveling with cannabis. So based on our analytics, we realized that on Instagram, people respond well to just sort of practical information about cannabis, and usually more consumer related and not so much like B2B, right? So my ideal client is somebody who's already operating in the cannabis space. That's not who I'm targeting with this message. With this message, we're talking to everyday people who want to know, am I allowed to get on a plane with my cannabis? And we found that content as it relates to parenting with cannabis, being a mom, that really gained a lot of traction for us as well. So it's those analytics helping us decide what we're going to talk about. The second one, so this is just a picture, and it was filmed as a reel, so it just looks like a video, and 27,000 people looked at this. You think about 27,000 people in a stadium, right? That's remarkable. I think, and so these are some examples. The last one on here is a quote. We found that people really like quotes. People really like seeing quotes from us, whether it's our quote or just a quote that we pulled from Twitter or for somewhere else. People really like seeing that, and that resonates with them. So I hope that's helpful. It shows that these posts they're relatable. When it says polarizing, anytime you create any sort of like controversy or pose questions to your audience, that's going to boost engagement, cultural relevancy, and also newsworthy, right? We like to educate and share the news in the industry and what's going on. It helps establish us as thought leaders. It helps inform and educate. So it really upholds all of our core values.
Yeah. And somebody just here asked, how frequently do you suggest posting? And I know for me, like Instagram is a little bit harder to post because I do like things to look a certain way. So sometimes I get in my own way and I don't post something because I want it to be perfect, and then too much time passes and it's not relevant anymore. So I'll just say, just go for it. Like, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not super pretty, but just go for it if you find that it's relevant and important. I'm much more active on LinkedIn because on LinkedIn, it's much easier for me to share posts, write comments, share things, that I've done, because I don't need a picture and I don't need a video, which is where on Instagram, you need one or the other. So like I said, also, don't be the perfectionist that I am and don't make the same mistakes and just save things until they're ready. Just really just send them out there. But once again, it's going to depend. I would just say that you at least are consistent in a rhythm, and you may not be posting, but maybe you're sharing it on your Instagram stories, your Facebook stories, or something like that. I'm much more active there. So once again, just truthfully depends. But for me, like I tell myself, like on LinkedIn, at least 4 times a week. On Instagram, I try to do between 2 to 3 a week, but even that for me is a lot.
For Instagram, we post every weekday. So 5 days a week. LinkedIn, I feel like LinkedIn and I have a relationship where sometimes it goes really cold and then sometimes it warms up. So it depends where we are in our relationship. But I think if you can post there twice a week, 3 times, the more you can post on LinkedIn, the better, especially in this space. And I also kind of wanted to point out when we were talking about like visual branding, you see here, like the navy blue is there. You'll see hints of pink. So that's just something that we've identified. And as far as posting, if you are a perfectionist, which I am too, what I did is I hired somebody to design a few backgrounds And so you'll see like this little blue with the leaves. That's like a stock background that we have saved so that anytime I want to put something together, I just grab that and I can type it on top of it. It's on brand, it's ready to go. So, that's a really helpful thing that I feel like we developed. So, you can hire someone to make these kind of like stock photos for you that you can use, and then, just type text over it if you want.
I think that that's a great suggestion, Maytal. Like if you can just find even like a design agency or something and ask them, hey, listen, and this is once you go through your brand strategy, which I highly recommend, you get your colors and you know how you want it to look like, get a few templates there, maybe one for speaking, one for news, one for just personal, and then they can just do it in a way that it is, you can revise it and you can customize it based on, what you want. So it's sort of like an upfront investment, right? It might cost you, something, but it is going to save you a lot of time and just make it a lot easier for you to post.
Yeah. And feel good about it, that it's like looking professional and refined.
Exactly. And so now we also get to the power of the internet part 2, where we're going to be talking about the website. I'm going to take it from the perspective of the employee side, where you're working for a law firm, so you don't have your own website, but you do have your own page on there. And that's really where you want to be very much in charge of your bio, because these law firms will try to create your bio for you. And a lot of times it's very dry, it's very cold. I would really advocate to make sure that you can craft your own bio in your own voice. And that's really where you want to start highlighting your speaking engagements, your press, all of this. Even if you don't have a lot, like that's totally okay. But to put something on there so that when somebody's looking for an attorney, and I know I do this for every single time. Anytime somebody refers an attorney, anytime somebody says, hey, do you know this attorney? I go to their webpage and I see what have they been doing? Where have they spoken at? Where have they been quoted in? What are they doing? It's what gives me at least the best snapshot of who they are. So I would say you may have to advocate for yourself a little bit at the firm, because they may want it to be in a very specific way, but craft it for yourself. And then here's like a tip. It's uncomfortable writing about yourself. It's uncomfortable talking about yourself, but you need to flex, because nobody is going to flex for you. So you need to do it yourself. You need to go and think of those accomplishments. Think of all of the things that you did. Think about the things that stand you apart from others and amplify it. And while in the beginning, it might be uncomfortable, it is a really good exercise to do quarterly, to understand, well, what have I accomplished? What have I done? What have I been featured in? Like I used to keep a whole Excel spreadsheet of every speaking engagement, whether it was a podcast, whether it was an Instagram live, or whether it was an event, whether it was a CLE, so that I could go back and see, what I've done. So in my last count, I have over 200 speaking engagements, and really like my 5 to 6 years, being in this, but it's cool because I can go back and look at that. So it's important for you to keep track of it. It's important for you to take control of that narrative on your firm's website page if you are working for a law firm, and like seriously flex as much as possible. Well, and that's accurate, like don't like make up things or exaggerate things, but things that are accurate that you have done, say it.
Yep. There's a book called How to Toot Your Own Horn Without Blowing It. And that's kind of what you want to do, right? As far as a website for a firm, this is obviously a big undertaking. I think it's one of the most important things you're going to do if you have your own firm is come up with a website that's going to speak to who you are as a firm. It's going to feel good whenever people visit and it's a representation of you. For me, visually, that's important. As far as functionally, you really need to, invest in making sure that it's accessible to folks. Now, SEO, search engine optimization, is its own animal. It's crazy and it's hard to implement. It really is hard to implement. And, when I first started my law firm and had a website, like I said, there was this thing called, I don't know if it still exists, Weebly drag and drop. I totally remember you would like drag and drop whatever it was, whether it was the text chat, like blah, it was like kind of like what you do in MailChimp today. But that was like the whole website. And then, I had someone in my office who I was in a shared office at the time, and they were like, oh, you should just start writing blogs. So I started writing for a very long time, just these very organic articles about what was happening in cannabis law, specifically in Los Angeles, usually, because that was a lot of what we did. We took on bigger kind of topics as time went on. And I never had anybody helping me with SEO. I remember there was this woman that was very successful at SEO, and I was like, will you help me? But it was just so cost prohibitive. She was amazing in what she was doing, but there was just no way that I could afford that at that time. So really SEO is important, but as long as you're getting content out there, that's what you should focus on. If you have the resources to really look into SEO, you can do webinars, you can find out what words work. In cannabis, it's a little trickier because it's so new. But you can hack it, you can figure it out. It's a lot of work. You can hire someone to help you with it. If neither of those are an option for you right now, it doesn't matter. Just put content out there on your website. Ask if you can write, if you work for another law firm, ask if you can write articles. If if it's your own firm, you should definitely have content that's being published all the time to get recognition and awareness, and establish yourself as a thought leader, of course. So, you may write an article that I've had it happen so many times where I've written articles and they're obscure, they're weird, but it just totally touches someone's issue. And immediately after the newsletter goes out, on that article, I've got a new client that's giving us a call. When you own your own law firm, or even when you're trying to build your own book at another law firm, it really is about, okay, how do we attract clients? How do we attract the right kind of clients that we want? And I think that your website and your online content is really a good way to do that.
And then Linktree also, or like any other sort of platform. So like when you go on your social media and like Instagram, for example, in your bio, you may put a link tree. So it'll have like different links, maybe different parts to your website. So let's say you put up a blog article on Instagram, and you want, and you're like, hey, go to my link tree, go to the website to find out. Well, you'll be able to just go to the link tree and it'll show them that article and specifically, so they don't have to go to your website, go to your blog tab, find that article, specifically. So it's also like the more shortcuts you can give readers and the audience, the better, right? We go back to, human beings being lazy. And I think, Maytala said, like the blog articles. So if you are working for a law firm, I remember, and I know this sounds super weird, I had to really push to write my own articles. And the reason for this is that they couldn't understand why I was trying to write what they consider to be basic articles. Like I wanted to write, like what are the 4, pillars of intellectual property? What makes a strong trademark? How to take inventory of your IP, of your intellectual property. And they couldn't understand why I was doing it. And the reason why I was doing that is because if I can create this type of authorship, then what I can do when people reach out to me, and I tested this out, people would reach out to me and say, hey, I'm looking for trademark help. And, I'd say, okay, well, great. Here's, for the initial consultation, how to book it. And by the way, just to make for a more fruitful conversation, here are 4 articles that you can read. And they loved it because they felt like they were getting free information from me without having to pay me for initial consultation. So the rate of retention increased dramatically when I would send over that email versus just okay, that's great, thanks for reaching out, here to sign up for a consultation. Because now I've established myself as somebody who does understand this material. And I feel like when you write opinion pieces or blog articles, it has this very interesting effect of all of a sudden, you are the expert on this subject. That is how you are perceived. And I know it may sound weird and crazy, but just think about it. When you've gone and researched something, and it typically goes back to like a law firm page, and at the bottom it'll say, contact us. Like you're probably more likely because you're like, oh, well, if they've taken the time to sit down and write about this, they must know what they're talking about. It really does have that effect.
And it's so funny as you're talking about that, Jess, it's like I'm thinking about when I first started my law firm and had 0 clients. And what I would do is I would print up little posters, take them to these dispensaries that weren't licensed yet, and just give them a little frequently asked question postcard, and then that turned into like, it was speaking at Oaksterdam at the time, but then I also just started creating my own free in-person cannabis, I call them Cannabis Law 101 events. And people would come. My first event, I had 3 people, you guys, like 3 people showed up. So embarrassing. And then, but I just kept going. And, you know, ultimately, like we started doing them, but right before the pandemic, and we were selling tickets for like $400 for these events, and people would come and pack the room and then hire us after that. So, you know, really establishing yourself as a thought leader today in the digital world, it's so easy. There's no excuse not to. Hopefully there will be a return to in-person events more so, and we can get back there a little bit too.
Yeah, and I think that brings us really to our next one in terms of networking. And the reason why I say get out of your car, no one's going to find you hiding under a rock. And the reason that I say get out of your car is because I remember when I was first starting out, I would sit outside of these cannabis events because I was like, I don't know anybody in these rooms. I'm coming here completely by myself. I am a first year being an attorney. Nobody's going to take me seriously. I'm 5'1", like I probably look like I'm 17. And all these thoughts just racing through my head that I literally sat in my car for a half hour after the event had started, trying to talk myself up to get in there, right? I had to like throw on some Daddy Yankee, and I had to take like a shot of tequila. And then I was able to like get into that room and get into that groove. Like, you just got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But that's why I say, you know, that networking, it's really not just about meeting new people, but it also has to do with being, once again, consistent and visible. A lot of this is going to come back to visibility. So I didn't know anybody in this first event. I didn't know anybody at the second event, but I knew one person at the third event. And by the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, I started to say, okay, now I know 10 people. Now I know 15 people. Now, if I go to a cannabis event here in New Jersey, in New York, likely I'm guaranteed I will know more than half of that room. But that was not the case 5 or 6 years ago, right? So get out of your car, hop in there, do what you got to do, and be consistent. Because if people see you constantly showing up at events, like you're going to almost become like they're part of this like little small like inner circle of the folks that are always there. And once again, if somebody needs something, they're going to say, oh yeah, like you're here, you're taking time out of your day to be here. It's extra work. And if you think about it, you finish with your day. Now you got to like get yourself ready. You have to drive over to an event. You have to pay for that event. Now you have to talk to people for 3 hours. Then you got to drive home. It is a lot, but that type of sacrifice in terms of time and energy is really worth it. And I know that I built up a lot of trust by simply attending events, because what I realized was if I come in to an event and say like, I'm a lawyer, like nobody likes lawyers, right? Like people need lawyers, but like, do people really like lawyers? Like, I don't really know. Like we do have like a not a great sort of reputation as a profession as a whole. So I knew that I had to be different. So I said, how am I going to have people look at me as not just a lawyer here to get clients and make money, but that I actually want to be a part of this industry, and I want to help out, and I want to service, and I want to educate. By showing up is how I got speaking engagements, because I was constantly showing up. I was talking to them. I was asking really good questions. So even networking can get you to some of these panels and the webinars. And I know that I have worked with especially some law students who have volunteered at events constantly in order to get in there. Like one person I really want to shout out is like Alana Hans Cohen, who like she would show up to so many events and volunteer. So she would help people check in. So now she was meeting all of these attorneys and all of these cannabis professionals who were checking in by virtue of volunteering. So she went from a volunteer to an attendee to a speaker. And that sort of, you know, evolution in such a short amount of time was really incredible to watch. So it really does pay off. And once you get to speaking and you're providing education and you're trying to sell, you know, your secret sauce, it's you offer the how and then you sell the implementation.
Well said. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's so funny because as you're talking about this stuff, it's so parallel, you know. I went to a lot of these events without knowing anybody, and it's really hard at first. But then, you know, you just got to keep going and keep doing it, and consistent attendance. panels, webinars. I always, if someone wasn't asking me to speak, I would just host, and you can also just host a Zoom. So you can be out there as a thought leader right away if you want to host your own. Education off of the house, all the implementation, absolutely. Group affiliations, obviously INCBA, shout out. And there's so many other groups that you can be a part of, and you have to do those things if you really want to make a difference, make your mark, and get people to notice you, eventually hire you. You have to do all these things. Some people, these events don't speak to them, they don't want to do it. I understand that, but just do whatever portion of it you can.
Yeah. And you don't have to go to all of them. Right. Like in the beginning, I was going to every single one possible. Like I was going to probably like 2 events a week that were happening between New Jersey and New York because we were really new. Now I get to be very selective. So I also think in terms of your branding, like show up to the events that also align, with your brand. Like, for example, part of my brand is making sure that I'm helping out, local minority owned entrepreneurs. So no, I'm not going to show up at the opening event of an MSO here in New Jersey. Like that just does not align with my brand. So when you're looking at these events to go to, also understand that it tells a lot about you in terms of what events you attend and you support, because you're supporting them with your time and your participation and your dollar bills. So if there is an event that's either sponsored by a particular group that you're not a fan of, maybe a company that you're not a fan of, an industry that you're not a fan of, then maybe you don't need to go there. So also just make sure you're very selective in that way, because I would never want anybody to say, you're such a hypocrite, you're spending money and your time going to this event, supporting the type of, sort of industry giants that you actively advocate, against. So once again, always making sure that you understand first what your brand is, and then understanding which events to go to. And this might also be trial and error once again. And now we are in the news cycle, which is very important because blog articles also, while they do start to have you be perceived as the expert, if you get quoted in a major, publication, like that stays on the internets forever. So it's really important that you get comfortable with being visible. And I think that's going to be a lot of, maybe folks on this call, folks that I've spoken to, that is the one thing they are terrified to put themselves out there, to put their opinions out there, to say something. They're like, what if this person doesn't like it? What if this? Like, I'm going to tell you right now, you are absolutely not going to make everybody happy. You will piss people off one way or another. But as long as what you are saying aligns with your values, as long as at the end of the day, you can say, you know what, I said what I said, period. Like you are going to be fine, because once again, it has to be authentic. It has to be, on brand. But you've got to get very comfortable with people disagreeing with you publicly. And I'm not one to engage in online arguments and battles. That may be your personality. Maybe that fits your brand. You want to be, that person that throws gasoline to the fire. Personally, I don't. I just walk away. I delete the comment. I move on. I pretend, it didn't happen. It's just not on my, on brand for me to be engaging in that type of discourse, but it might be for you. So in terms of this, like, how do I get quoted? The easiest way to get quoted in press, at least in my experience, has been advocacy. Because if you attend a municipal hearing, you attend a regulatory hearing, you attend a state hearing, you attend a federal hearing, there's going to be reporters there. And what I've always tried to do is I have always tried to come up with like one very saucy one-liner that I know is quotable and that's going to pop, because that's what they want. They want people to read their articles. So they want to come up with these like really like exaggerated quotes and things that happen. They want drama. So sometimes you got to play the game and you got to be a little dramatic. And so that's what at least I've done in my advocacy, is I make sure I have a couple of really solid one-liners that press can really sink into.
Yeah, that's great. I think I think there's also outreach that you can do, especially as the lawyers, if you want to offer a legal opinion on something that's in the news, you can, you can see who's writing various articles and you can reach out to them directly via email, via LinkedIn, whatever it is, to get recognition and awareness. Some people get PR companies. I've never worked with a PR company, but I know they can be impactful. Social media, a long time ago, there was a lot of controversy in the city of Los Angeles regarding various rules and regulations and licensing. I won't bore you, but we did some social media posts that were very controversial, and it was a challenge to navigate that, getting comments and trying to understand where other people were coming from and still, work within that. It can be a challenge, especially in something in like social media where everyone has access to comment on whatever you're doing.
Yeah. And I also think like you can tag journalists on social media. So especially like on Twitter, like Instagram, like especially like in the beginning, like I was like tagging NJ.com and I was tagging NJ Canvas Insider and I was tagging them to make sure that if I did have a hot take on something, that somebody was noticing my hot take. And then eventually, like the more you do it, they're like, who is this person that just keeps tagging us on this? Like you're going to get their attention some way or another. Once again, through consistency. But that's also another way to really
you need
start.
some chutzpah. You need some chutzpah. Yeah. Like you get like there's no shame. You have to do it.
There really is no shame. And I think like that's what I would love to get across to everybody is like, you just have to try these things out. And like to you, they may seem silly or you don't want to be like bothering like anybody or things like that. And I feel like for a lot of women, that tends to be, the case, but you just got to do it. And you just have to have the courage to do it and the courage to say, what, if I put something of myself out there, I'm going to stand by it. And I'm not going to lie, there are times where I've posted certain things and it's like blown up and people are reposting it and sharing it. And then I'm sitting, on my couch at like 10 o'clock at night and I'm like, oh my God, I don't think I should have done that. And I start going through all these wild scenarios of somebody's going to come at me and somebody's going to reprimand me and like, guess what? Like none of that happens. So the reason why you should also take comfort in that is because unless someone is also in that arena with you, putting themselves out there, exposing their vulnerabilities, stating, their opinions, like you should not really give a shit what they think. Like it is super easy to boo from the cheap seats. It's very hard to boo when you are in that arena yourself. So I tell people, all the time, I say, listen, if you are not shoulder to shoulder with me advocating for cannabis legalization, like in New Jersey, I don't give a fuck what you think about my advocacy and the way that I approach things, because I was effective and you weren't there. So if I see folks who are just sort of internet trolls, which happen, all the time, you just can't control them, that they are what they are, don't take it personally. Don't let that get to you. And then don't let it discourage you, because I think that it can easily discourage somebody from voicing your opinions and your thoughts when people are immediately shutting that down. But it's very easy to shut shit down on social media. You just got to keep going.
Yeah, you just got to keep going. Yep. And I've even fallen into traps, with people with comments and whatever, and just have to move on. It will pass. It does pass, and that's it.
Yeah. Exactly. And then perhaps some of you may be wondering, like, how can I promote an event that I am speaking at? So maybe you're about to get your first speaking engagement or you're looking for some and you don't really know how to amplify that. Self-promotion can be very uncomfortable, but you are your own best advocate. You are lawyers or you are law students. You are trained to be natural advocates. You may have even been born, with this specific skill. Now you just really have to leverage it. So at least in terms of, events, the first thing that you want to do is gather the assets. And I know that before, like I used to try to come up with my own like graphic designs and I would spend time on them and all this stuff. And it was just not going anywhere. So I ask for those assets now. Hey, do you have a social media asset that I can share? And that way you have it. And then you put the onus on them to create it, maybe with their own specific style. But maybe if you already have your own template, you can do that on your own. I think that just sort of depends, on a choice. You have to prepare the copy. Sometimes these events will give you their own copy. I would probably say 80% of the time, I have it either revised, changed, and used different words in the copy that a lot of these events will give me, because it's just not my voice. Once again, like, I'm not going to be on, sort of Instagram being like, hey there, hey all. It's just not how I approach my audience. So you have to understand. And then timelines and frequency for posting that. I'll pitch over to you, Maytal.
Yeah, this is something like for INCBA, for example, they want you to, if you're going to be a speaker on one of their panels, to post the assets at least 2 or 3 times before the event, one definitely the week of, the day of, I think a reminder the day of, honestly, especially if it's a webinar, is so powerful, because people don't know what they're doing. They don't want to commit to anything until the day of. And so I think, you want to, if you have the assets in time, you want to post 2 to 3 times plus for the event across multiple platforms if you can. And most effective, I think, is, a week before, the week of, the day of. And we used to represent a trade association of like 300 growers in LA. And there were a lot of events that they would host, and we would help them to promote them. And that was always our cadence as well. Because people tend to forget things if you don't remind them kind of the day before, the day of. So I think that's really important when you're on a speaking event, and ultimately your panel is going to succeed if you promote it. So some of you may have received a message from me today in LinkedIn saying, reminder, this event is happening. Here's the link, a private message that took me 5 minutes to send out to various folks, and was just kind of a nice outreach effort, because I wanted people to come and to join us and to benefit from this experience. I also wanted to promote International Cannabis Bar Association. Obviously, I'm very closely affiliated with them, so even if I always think about like the qualitative factor and not just the quantitative factor. So even if I might send out 100 messages and I get 2 responses, right? My first seminar, I had 3 people attend. It's all the people that I invited, even if they didn't attend, I still was in front of them. And then, maybe they come to the next one, or they think, oh, well, next, and that was just me literally going to dispensaries and saying, hi, I'm a new lawyer. Nice to meet you. Here's some frequently asked questions. By the way, I'm having an event where I'm speaking. If you want to learn the basics of compliance, please come. And that's really what I built my practice on.
Yeah. And I think it's great. And I think, it just has to do with like folks, like if you want to be seen, if you want to build, that personal brand, it's just really going to be all about getting creative, as well. And as if you do not have the budget for a design company, a marketing company, or, a PR agency, like it's possible to do it on your own. Like I know I get questions all the time, like, who's your PR firm? Who's your PR firm? And I've never hired a PR firm. I've just gotten a lot of this press just because of things that I say, because there's a lot of people who I think are going to be afraid.
Yes, we're getting a request for a saucy one-liner. Can you give us
for a saucy one-liner?
What's an example of a saucy one-liner?
I think one of the one-liners that I had, and I ended up getting quoted in Rolling Stone, and this was back when New Jersey was legalizing and passing their law. And I just hated the adult use law, the way that it was originally drafted. And so New Jersey at this time was touting this adult use legislation as the end all be all of social justice and social equity in the country. Like they said, this is the most equitable statute law in the US. And I was like, this is absolutely false, completely untrue. So what I did was like, I counted the words of the statute, and I look at the page numbers, like 260 pages, and it was 95,000 words. So I said something along the lines of like, New Jersey is touting this as the most, equitable piece of legislation in the country. But in 95,000 words and in 260 pages, the word equity doesn't appear once. And Rolling Stone took that and like ran with it, but like, that's just what I had to do, because like, I don't know if anybody else is going to be counting how many words, are in this, but that was sort of, I think, one of my most memorable saucy one-liners that Rolling Stone just really seemed to like. So yes, I think, we've gotten to the end of our presentation. If there are any sort of questions that anybody has, but I hope we got the message across to you that, you've got to be brave. You've got to get out there. It is possible to do this without a lot of resources, but creativity is really going to be a big part of it, and just trial and error, which I know is kind of annoying sometimes to think about this, but it really is. So we have any questions? Let's see. I think we've answered all of them.
We had a question about hashtags.
Oh, yes. You want to comment on that, Maytal?
I'm going to defer to you on this, Jess.
So I don't use hashtags in my Instagram. And the reason is, like, I used to, but anything with cannabis in there just gets flagged, immediately. I have been shadow banned on Instagram left and right, which, for folks who don't know what shadow banning is, it's like Instagram puts you in a timeout, essentially. Like, you're not blocked, your account isn't deleted, but you're not going to show up on people's feed. And if somebody tries to look you up, they have to write out your entire
You have
name.
to write it exactly.
Exactly, the entire thing. And then you still may not even come up. So it's called shadow banning. So that happened to me just so often. So it took me a while to build my following list, because I also had Canna in the beginning of my name, which I did end up changing to have it just be my name. And a lot of people said, like, why did you, we loved Canna Bogada, and that was really my brand for a long time. And I said, well, it doesn't let me grow because Canna, is in the beginning of it, and I just keep getting shadow banned. So I don't use hashtags on there for that reason, but I do use them on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn doesn't have a lot of this cannabis blocking algorithms. I put cannabis community, cannabis education, and I feel more comfortable using cannabis on there for my reach. It's been pretty successful. I think in terms of social media, like on Instagram, you can probably use it, but I at least personally, my experience would caution against using cannabis in your caption and in your hashtags. But I also don't like seeing long posts that have like 20 hashtags in them, right? So I think if you're
So
going
as a cure to that, you can put your hashtags in a comment, which is what I see people do. I also don't really trust the hashtags too much, but I know my social media folks, they use them sometimes, and they basically just have a list of like 10 of them that they'll kind of use interchangeably, and they'll do it in a comment as opposed to in the caption itself. And they won't always use them.
Yeah. So once again, trial and error, right?
Trial and error.
See whether or not it works out. It didn't really work out for me. For other people, it might, work out. So try to figure out what your sort of audience base is. Sometimes I just will tag, I'll tag Jersey City. I'll tag New York. I think locations I've had pretty good success with in hashtagging locations, because then there's like a lot of people either from the city or everything that will look at you and amplify your profile. And then I would also say, I use stories a lot as well to connect with a lot of my audience. So I may not be posting, but I will post things on my story, like, new update, new event, or here's where I am, or even showing a little bit of my personal life, which I think is also important to touch on, is to also show, a little bit, maybe some personal, things, about you. Like, people want to know that you are human. And I think the more human that you can appear,
absolutely,
the better it's going to be for you to connect with people, because they're going to say, oh, like, I can trust you, right? Like, once again, we have to understand, we are lawyers. We have the stigma of being uptight and ruthless and greedy, et cetera, whatever you want to call it. So if you can show like you're a human being, right? Like, I definitely focus a lot on my Latino community, on a lot of my family. I show the fact that I began to take a swim class lesson to show, that I'm willing to do things that scare me and try out new things. And, I know Maytal, with you being, a mom and, all of this stuff and running your own law firm and doing all of this, like, it's important to show that, because I remember seeing yours and being like, wow, like, she's a mom, she has like an all-female attorney, like, she looks super cool, like, she's smoking weed, she's working out in the morning, I was like, this woman's got it all. I want to talk to her.
Yeah, the personal stuff, that's hard for me to share, actually. We do it sometimes, but I feel a little protective about it sometimes. But when we do it, it has some of the best engagement.
Yeah, people love that. And I think somebody asked, do stories disappear after some time? Yes, they disappear after 24 hours. And do I like that over permanent content? Sometimes. Sometimes I'm just, I don't really want something really living permanently. It may just be like, something newsworthy that came up. And once again, like I realized early on, I did not want to be known as like your source for cannabis news. There are other accounts that do that. For me, as like, if I start out that way, I'm going to drive myself insane because I'm a perfectionist. And what if I miss a news article or I miss a very important bill dropping in the Senate? So I did not want to do that. So I instead put that on my stories as opposed to my actual feed as well. So once again, it just goes back to your own personal preference and how you want people to view your profile.
And you can, if you want your stories to live on, then you can create like highlights. So if you do a story and you're like, oh, I really like that story that I did, I think one of the things we first did was like, we created highlights of like frequently asked questions or, whatever it was. So you can put them in your highlight reel if you want them to live on. And you will always have access to them, but your audience will not.
Yeah. And I also think what's cool about stories, and maybe, this will work out for folks, is I use it as like a soft launch to figure out the engagement for certain posts. So if I will post something and I'm getting a lot of feedback from people on my stories and they're sending comments and they're liking it and etc., I realize like, oh, if I post this might actually be a high performance post. So I soft launch information in my stories first to determine how well it will do. And then I'll just take it from there and post it and then just like try to like estimate that engagement. So like once again,
trial and error, more trial and error.
Yeah, and like the soft launch
works
out well. Yeah. So I think we've come to.
I don't want to interrupt you because I'm learning so much. This is just absolutely fascinating, and I'm realizing one that I think our official account on Instagram has been shadow banned for quite a while.
Probably.
I was like, why aren't we showing up on anything? So that just clicked.
You are shadow banned. You are, because I remember
shadow banned. It's really hard to tag international.
Yes, super hard to tag.
Really hard, yeah. So we need some advice about how to navigate that.
Yeah, because if you end up tagging accounts that are shadow banned, your engagement also goes down.
Yeah.
So sometimes like I won't tag specific companies. It's like I can't have you bringing my engagement down. So we got to try to figure out a way to get INCBA out of there. Out of time.
I love it. No, and then, it's, I find myself really having a lot of difficulty around that personal posting, sort of like cadence, like finding things that I feel like are worth saying something. So like, I know that a lot of our people that are watching today, just as one last question, I know that sort of, for me, my social media of choice is LinkedIn, but I know that populating that with 5 days a week or even 3 days a week of content, like I'm not going to write 3 blogs in a week. We just don't have time to do that. So like, what's a good way to start out with posting that's something maybe like a little bit short of writing that full-fledged blog? Like, what's a good way just to sort of like start
sharing news articles and giving like
so easy
a one-liner, opinion, a two-liner opinion, because here's what also is the effect of it. If you post an article and you say like some sort of, comment about it, like 2-line sentences, people will think that you're actually quoted in the article or that you were in that article. I've had people be like, oh, wow, you were in this. And I'm like, I was not. I just reposted it and added my own opinion on there. But I also think it's important to engage with other people as well on LinkedIn. So it's really important, to go maybe like somebody's post, comment on somebody's post, because then you start showing up on other people's feeds as well. So that's why I like LinkedIn, because it's so low maintenance. Like just the share button is super easy, or you can just like write on people's things. And so I know somebody asked the question of whether or not you shared on your company page or personal. So I think Maytal, that question may be more to you because you have your own company.
I have a company page that's my company page, and then I have my personal page, and I share things to both. If you work for another firm, I would always invest in your own personal, and that on LinkedIn specifically, you have more functionality and more tools with your personal account than you do with a company page, but your company can always repost what you're doing. And I always think about like something like LinkedIn. It's kind of like, it's a community, right? It's a forum. So if you don't want to go in and post like some proselytizing like post or whatever it is, you can just think of it like you're at an event, an actual in-person event, and you just go around and you just engage with what other people are doing and saying, and just take interest uniquely in others and in what and then you can use it also to promote whatever it is you're trying to promote. But I like people's posts. I comment on people's posts. The news article thing is a great idea. What else can you do on LinkedIn? DMs on LinkedIn, if there's anybody that you're interested in talking to. I've gotten, one of the lawyers that works with me, I met him on LinkedIn. I've never met him in person, actually. Like, we just started chatting in DMs on LinkedIn. And then, we ended up working with him. So it's really an opportunity everywhere, not just to post, but also to engage with others. Because I can get a little bit of writer's block when I go to post, unless I have like a specific thing I want to say. And then I start thinking about, what are people going to say about this? Are they going to think it's dumb? Are they going to get into your head? And so, instead of posting, sometimes I'll just engage with other people.
Love it.
Don't
And
sleep
tag
on
us.
LinkedIn.
Anyone that wants to post stuff, tag us. We'll share your stuff too. So we as an association are trying to get more active on LinkedIn as well. So if you want any amplification, please continue to tag us. Y'all are awesome. I really appreciate it. And I can see, one of the things that you guys touched on was, find something that doesn't feel like work. And I can see the excitement that both of you have around sort of like building these personal brands, and all your eyes are like lighting up at these things. And so I can tell that you guys really treat this as a passion project in addition to business development. So lot to learn from both of you. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I know that this has been a good length of time, so 90 minutes. I could listen to you guys for another at least twice as long, so maybe we'll do a little bit of follow-up on this. And again, INCBA really appreciates it. We love having you here, and thank you to all of our attendees that showed up today. Please do sign up for in-person events, that in-person networking. I know it sounds like a chore, but INCBA events are sort of a different breed. So we make sure that we have fun while we learn and get to meet each other.